Welcome. We do it in English.
In English.
English.
Sure. Ruby, English?
איך שאתם רוצות.
Of course. Hi, Tzili.
Yes.
Hi.
Welcome,
Welcome,
Tzipi. Welcome,
Tzipi.
everybody.
Hi, Professor Reuven Dar. Professor at Tel Aviv University. He was the chair of the clinical...
I was the head of the clinical track at the time, Tel Aviv
in the
University.
psychology department.
Right.
I must say that he is a very good psychologist. And later we have a punchline, but we'll leave it.
Okay.
The punchline, two punchlines, and we'll leave it.
So, give us one.
What?
Give us one.
No. So, the reason why I'm eager to talk to you, and Tzili too, because I wonder what will happen to our society, which we love, devoted, feel very part, doesn't matter, who is leading us. We care, I mean, we can be angry, but we love the country very much. What will happen to us with all the OCD, all the paranoia, all the phobia, all the, post-traumatic
trauma,
post-trauma from before, coming back now, and the new ones, etc., and the panic attack. I mean, I don't know but I leave you how you want to start, but we worry.
Yeah, I think I think of the things that you mentioned, the main thing to worry about is the trauma and the PTSD, the post-traumatic stress disorder, which is likely to be in very, very large numbers. Paradoxically, most of the other disorders like OCD that you mentioned and panic disorder, they don't tend to increase very much during times of serious, highly stressed situations. They are sort of, I mean, people with OCD, for example, they tend to be very idiosyncratic. They have these ideas that have to do with maybe worry about not being clean enough or touching something that's contaminated, or checking things over and over again. And those don't tend to increase too much in times of war. Actually, I have one patient who found himself in the war, and he's going to the war zone, and he's actually much happier than he was when he was at home in Tel Aviv, because he's found friends and he has a nice community there, so to speak, and it feels like
don't recommend it.
Depends, I'm not sure. I think it was actually interesting to me to find that he found that it's a good experience for him, and I don't think it increases his OCD. But in terms of trauma, we're certainly in a situation that that will surely increase the number of people suffering from trauma now, of course, but also many of them will suffer from chronic disease, the chronic stress disorder. We're doing as much as we can now in many areas to try to prevent that, or to minimize the number of people that we think or we worry that will develop the chronic condition called PTSD. So I think I told you I spent 2 weeks at the hotel in the Dead Sea in Yam HaMelech with refugees from one of the kibbutzim, the largest kibbutz actually that was attacked during October 7th, and that's the kibbutz Be'eri.
Right.
And that kibbutz, almost all of the kibbutz has moved as a unit to this large hotel near the Dead Sea, and we established a group that helped them to, the idea is to try to avert the development of chronic trauma. So we spent time talking to them, hearing their stories, giving them encouragement, making them feel powerful and part of a larger community, and so on. And those efforts, I think, are now going on all over the country, with the idea that that's the most important thing to do now for people who are in the mental health helping professions.
Ruvi, I want to ask you something. Between personal trauma and all the rest, and the nation trauma and the national post-trauma, how do you define between the two, and how do you address it?
That's a very good question. So I think, when you talk about the psychiatric or psychological definition of PTSD or trauma reaction, then you talk about real personal trauma, usually that you felt that your own life was at risk or someone else close to you was at risk, and there's a real trauma in the very concrete personal sense. When we talk about national trauma, I think it's more of a metaphor. It's not really, most people like me who experience this as a shock, as very worrying, depressing, and painful event. I wouldn't consider it a trauma for me. I mean, I don't think people like me, who've, even with all the weight that we feel on our shoulders and all the worry, are likely to develop trauma unless we were exposed directly to, terrorists coming to our house.
That's very important, because all of my friends, I think it's including me, are using post-trauma as it, right? We just use it, and maybe, taking care of those that you're talking about, and then telling me and all of me, that be careful when you call yourself post-trauma.
Right. I think it shouldn't be used lightly. It's like people sometimes use, the word, my husband is autistic,
Right.
And, and they don't really mean autistic in the sense that people on the autistic spectrum really
but
are.
They know they don't mean it literally. When
That's right.
I say post-trauma, it's almost, I develop almost a comforting kind of.
Why? Because
it's helpful to stay sane,
like
the whole process.
Insane.
But you can see how the Israelis react, and you see, especially when you're outside of Israel, the Israelis react differently to sirens. The Israeli react differently to noises. You have it. The thing is that
for a short time, usually, yeah, that's true, yeah.
But also, you don't think it influence decisions?
Sure.
So this
sure it does. Sure it does. I mean, people, question whether living here makes sense, and people leave the country, or people want to protect their children, or people, they may rethink their life story or their life agendas. But that doesn't mean they're in trauma. It just means that something very dramatic happened to all of us, which makes us rethink our lives.
What do you mean? What people mean when they say that we are getting away from ourselves during this time, or using proxies?
Using proxies, you mean as part of my theory of OCD, maybe, but I don't think that's relevant. I think
if you can explain it first.
You want to know about my theory of OCD? Yeah. I'm not sure if it will tie into this topic, but the idea that we developed this is myself and Nira and
Professor Nira Lieberman.
That's right. Who's also my partner, and Amit Lazarov, who is a professor at our department, used to be our student, my student especially. So we have this idea that if you think of the symptoms of OCD, you can understand them as coming from an attempt to compensate for difficulty in accessing your own internal states. So if you want to know whether you love your partner, if you want to know if you are truly believe in God, if you want to know what emotions you're feeling, and even things of state like hunger. Am I hungry? What do I feel like eating? All of these things are in our theory called internal states. And we believe, and there's evidence that we have, that people who have OCD or high on the OCD spectrum have difficulty accessing precisely these internal states. So what they need to do instead is they have to infer about their internal states using what we call proxies. So for example, if you don't know how much you love your partner, you can count the number of text messages that you exchange, or you can see how much money you spend buying them presents. If you don't know how hungry you are, you can rely on precedents, like how much you ate yesterday, or what's considered a portion of food in McDonald's, or you can test whether your shirt is hanging tight or loose on your belly. All these are what we call proxies for the internal state.
Basically, you find a tool to measure.
That's right, exactly. Indexes or tools to measure, exactly. and rules and rituals, which are part of the OCD main symptoms, are proxies in our theory. So if you don't have a sense that your hands are clean after you wash them, then you develop a procedure that would help you wash your hands and say, okay, I've done my procedure, now I'm clean. And the similar rules and rituals are very typical to OCD in general.
So can you explain how come OCD did not rise now with what's happening?
I think that, again, I don't have the statistics. If it rises in small quantities. I mean, it's really more likely to rise, for example, if you have a pandemic, right? Because people, if you're worried about your health and you're worried about touching contaminants, that would likely to increase in the pandemic. And I'm not even sure that even there, but I'm not sure because I didn't look at the statistics. But generally, again, what happens is that OCD is a very peculiar condition where people are worried about very idiosyncratic stuff like getting contaminated or not locking the house and going back to check. And there's no reason that these kinds of things would increase because it's really irrelevant to the kind of stress we're really, all of us are in. So yeah, you would see increase like all of us in worry. Maybe during the pandemic, you'll see increase in depression because people were lonely and anxiety about the future. Clearly, we see it, and I think all of us experience that. But not in these idiosyncratic problems like OCD necessarily.
Now, there is, so let's go back for a minute to post-trauma, that we all define ourselves as post-traumatic, but it's fueled by some kind of empirical or reality. For example,
let me just close the door for a second. Just a second.
What did you say?
Sure, let's go to
closing the door for a second. Yeah, sorry.
No. What I mean that the fear for the future is quite real.
Mm-hmm.
It's not, to fear from all those missiles. That Syria is and Iran talking about it. And
yeah. I think there's a decrease in the sense of security that we all have. And this sense of uncertainty about the future is, I think, very common now to all of us.
So you say it's clearly affecting our decision-making.
It certainly brings questions. I mean, I think if people like many people around me didn't think seriously about where they're going to live in the rest of their lives, they may be now thinking that.
Wow.
Right? They may be raises questions now about, especially if they have kids and they worry about the kids and do they.
But also, it became legitimate. No,
I think it's
the
been legitimate for a
legitimacy
long time now.
is all the
really?
time. The legitimacy.
I think, when we were kids, you're right. When we were kids, we had these derogatory terms, right, to talk about the Israelis who leave the country, Yodim, and so on, and Rabin famous words calling them the Folet Shel Nemoshot. But
hold on. Tzipi still think it. Can you explain a little bit more? Why do you feel guilty?
It's not that I feel guilty. I think that, although I'm 6 months here and 6 months there, and never mind the circumstances, and I wish it would not be like that. Because I think that our place is over there.
Over there, I mean over
in
here.
Israel, right. And I think that being here, it's kind of avoiding taking, breaking our commitment to the place we grew up, to what I believe in the ideology, the need for existence of Israel. Not all of it, not the West Bank, maybe, but it's complicated. But still, I will not. For example, I'm planning to come now on the 12th because I'm teaching. Okay, people ask me, "Are you crazy?" No, I have to go.
No, going home is going home. It has nothing to do with
going home now.
Yeah.
So for me, it's I'm still with Rabin assessment that it's.
It's not a it's criticism with a curse, because they call you names. And the thing is, Tzipi is not alone. There are still people that are running around the world with the guilt, and they need
Don't
to
feel guilty.
apologize. And it's part of the Israeli society to carry, even today, to carry these words. There's no need. There's no need.
Do you hear sounds from outside your room? Because we don't.
Okay, good. No, I'm hearing.
We don't hear
my boy
anything.
just came in, and I think Nira is coming too. So
Yeah, no. So one of my fears is that a lot of people will leave Israel.
But you know what? I'll take it further. The big difference in Israel is that people like us always question, like for many decades now, whether they should leave, whether they should stay, whether it's the option is there. It's in the air. The very right-wing people, they never question it.
Right.
They never question it. For them, it's obvious they're in Israel. It's obvious they need to stay. They don't ask questions.
Yeah, but still, they are also willing to die for their ideas, and we don't. So all those settlers, some of them, it doesn't agree with me.
Not necessarily. I mean, and now you see, I'm not sure if the willingness to die or the willingness to fight all the way is stronger among settlers. I'm not sure about that. I mean, look, I'm sure you're watching TV now and you're watching.
I'm not speaking about the war. I speak about people who have strong either
ideology,
religious belief,
emotional commitment.
Maybe.
The whole attitude around them is, first of all, they don't question where they need to stay. It's obviously in Israel. It's our place. It's our country. It's our land. We have to protect it. We have to stay here, period. Nobody would question whether they need to relocate themselves or not.
Yeah, but
I don't know if it's true or not. I mean, we know of many for example, the Hasidic Jews many of them are in America. But and I don't know if
those who moved from Israel. I'm not talking about those who are here for generations. I'm talking about those who live in Israel and thinking about.
It may be. I mean, I don't know if anybody looked at the percentage of people, religious versus secular, who left the country. I mean, it may be true. It's an empirical question. I do agree with you that if you have this religious commitment, it adds on to your commitment to be here. That's probably true.
Tell me something. What do you think will happen after the war? Because a lot of people don't. Like here, they don't differentiate in America, a lot of them, between State of Israel and Judaism, anti-Semitism, and being against the policy of Israel. But also in Israel, we have too many people who think the Palestinian is a Palestinian, and they don't differentiate Palestinian from Hamas people. And I worry that this notion of let's kill the Arabs will stay after the war.
I have no idea. I really don't. I don't feel qualified to say much about this, but I feel that if anything...
No, but you know that about attitude change and how can...
Yeah, but I don't know about these particular attitudes. I think that my impression is that actually what happened now maybe will actually differentiate more between the Hamas and the rest of the Palestinians because of what they did. And the equation of the Hamas specifically with Al-Qaeda and the equation of... And I think there's a lot more people talking about these differences between the Hamas and the PLO, for example, and their motives, which seem to be very different, and the emphasis on religion within Hamas and Hezbollah versus more, I think, political awareness among the PLO and more, I don't know, a political agenda among the PLO. So I'm not sure that will actually blur the confusion, blur the distinction. I'm not sure.
It also depends, or their economical situation, and the abilities, they're depend on the Hamas. I don't know how much they can fight it individually or everybody against.
Yeah, this is not an area that I feel an expert on. I can say that many people are now working on trying to, many people are involved in various forums and think tanks that are trying to consider what's going to be the day after and trying to think of solutions that would not be just local concrete solutions, but maybe solutions that try to apply to the wider problem of our relationship with the Arabs and Palestinians.
Are you part of this think thing?
No, Nira is. Nira is. I'm not. I'm more. I found myself much more involved in the more personal, clinical stuff. So, I told you working with the refugees from Be'eri. We are now developing very quickly a trauma clinic at the university. There was a building that was contributed to us, and we were supposed to open this trauma clinic in 3 years. But what happened now made us all make this process much more urgent, and we're going to
It will be
start.
open to the public?
It will be open for everyone who has a trauma. Yeah, public, of course, not just soldiers or people with war
It's
trauma.
wonderful that your university is doing it.
Yeah. So we're actually looks like we will be open it on January 1st.
Wow.
And we have many contributors till we get donations from the university president through other people, and
amazing.
And it's ready to go. And I think the urgency, the understanding that we better be able to handle these people now, people coming with trauma, to prevent chronization, is motivating all of us to do it quickly. So there's many efforts around us and that's why I find myself more involved, because I feel that's my expertise. That's where
but it's more like private, because I don't feel that the state, the country, is doing enough, to take care of its people, and it's more on a private level. Or
university is not the government.
It's not a government.
University is not a government, but it is public, and it's not private in that sense. What happened in the hotel where I was, it started completely as a grassroots thing. So people came. The second day after the event, when people were moved into this hotel, people just came. They came on their own, and they started treating people. It was actually quite chaotic in the beginning, but very quickly they formed a team with principles, and that, operating principles, that began to get much more better organized with regular meetings and so on. By now, what happened, 50 days later, is that the government is putting people in there in a more organized fashion, so that people there are employees and they get paid and so on. So the volunteers have moved out. They're still working hard, but they still work for volunteers, but it became more organized and more state organized. So that's where I find myself more effective, or finding that, but less so, in my own, I don't know that I can contribute to forums like the day after, because I'm not a strategist and I'm not a politician.
Actually, I want to make sure not to forget. I have to take care of myself also. Is the war going to influence our, how you say it, הפרעת אכילה?
Eating disorders?
Eating disorder, like eating a meal every 2 hours or so.
That's probably very personal. If you use eating to cope with anxiety and stress, then probably, right? So every stressful period,
it can increase
all the time.
Yeah,
it can, sure.
It can increase. So
some people eat more, some people eat less. So it really depends.
Oh, really? I don't know then.
Of course.
For some people, it eliminates the hunger. For some people,
their appetite. Yeah, that's right.
Sorry, I disturbed you.
No, I forgot what I.
No, but but Reuven is also first of all, he's also a paint. He really paints wonderfully.
Thank you.
Must admit, and he's very devoted to painting, right?
It's like do it as a serious hobby. Yeah,
he's serious.
But now I remember what I wanted to ask.
Oh, okay.
Reuven, this is a very general question, and it's not only for Israel. What is it that leaders or governments or politicians, you name it, send everybody to war much easier than welcoming them back and making sure and taking care to treat them as much as they need after they get back from the service?
I don't know. You're saying it as a fact, and I'm not sure it's a fact.
But no, and it was not known, the whole treatment.
That's a different
traumatic.
question.
It's something.
So that's true. That's true. So the whole idea of the whole concept of trauma, specifically combat trauma, has changed a lot since the Second World War. I think the first book on trauma, war-related, and how to treat it was following the Second World War, if I'm not mistaken. There's a book called Men Under Stress that talks about all these cases that were treated then by psychiatrists, people who suffered trauma from the war. Before that, it was basically unknown, or people use this derogatory term like battle shock or shell shock.
Right.
Shell shock was the original expression.
Right.
And that was, basically saying that people are fearful, or, the soldiers are not brave. Those soldiers who had this problem are not brave. And it was derogatory. Nobody treated them. They were seen as I don't know, weak. I guess you're right. Exactly. Weak. And the idea that it's a common problem only started the Second World War. And even in Israel, when I fought in the 73 war as a soldier, and even then, I remember very vaguely some people who apparently, with hindsight, I can say, had trauma from the war and left, but there was no protocol for treating them. That developed only after the Yom Kippur War. Firstly, and the whole awareness of trauma, and also later knowing that it's not caused only by war, but also by, sexual violence, for example, or car accidents, that it's a much wider problem than people recognize, and it's a legitimate problem.
Right.
There should be ways to treat it. It developed fairly late.
Yeah, but I think that on some level, they don't take it in consideration, because even sending soldiers to run the civilians in the occupied territories, it's a long process of troubling times for any individual then later on to get out of the army and function.
No, I agree. These are it's very people do suffer. Mm-hmm. Yeah, but governments do what they think they I mean, the reasons are political, or the reasons are wider interests of supposedly of the good of all of us. And of course they're aware that that people pay a price, that soldiers pay a price for doing that.
That's the thing, the servants of the system are paying the price and not necessarily covered later on.
And so I think, again, this has changed. I think now in Israel there's much more awareness, many more institutions that are attempting to address this problem.
Especially after what is about, the guy who burned himself because he couldn't get an answer for
but this was very late.
Yeah, that was 3 years ago, maybe. But, I would like to make sure that we also mentioned that, that Professor Dar is also kind of, there is provocateur.
In what sense?
Provocateur. Can you talk a little bit about your ideas about smoking, which is not really orthodox?
It's
not orthodox. And you look such an,
nice guy.
nice guy, kind of mainstream, trusted.
So, I didn't do this alone. I did it with Hanan Frank, my friend.
Good friend.
Very well. By the way, Hanan has suffered from PTSD all his life.
I know. We know he lost 2 of his legs, and he's not even...
2 of his legs, going over landmine in the early 70s. I think even late 60s, probably 69 or 70. And he is a much more natural provocateur than I am, right? But the idea that we developed together is that if you look at the literature that supports the thesis that nicotine is addictive and that people smoke because of the nicotine, that when you look at the literature closely, you find that it has very flimsy basis. And there's really very little evidence, and there's a lot of contra-evidence to the idea that people smoke because of the nicotine in the cigarettes. So we did a lot of reviews on that together, and then I did several empirical studies, including studies of religious Jews, and showing that craving to smoke, for example, is dissociated from the level of nicotine in your system. So if you, so for example, we looked at, we had two studies. One of them I did looking at religious Orthodox people who don't smoke on the Sabbath.
Right.
And
they smoke a lot. Many of them smoke a lot during the week.
During the week, they smoke a lot. We looked at heavy smokers or relatively heavy smokers. And during the Sabbath, when they wake up in the morning, even though their system is deprived of nicotine from Friday night, they don't experience any craving to smoke because they know they won't be able to. So craving is a lot to do with expectation rather than with physiological factors like the presence of nicotine in the system. We had a similar study. I'll try to make it simple. So we looked at flight attendants who smoke. But during the flight, of course, they don't smoke. And then we asked them to report their craving to smoke every hour or so during the flight. And we had long flights. We looked at long flights like to New York or LA, 10, 12, 13 hours, 15 hours, and then short flights within Europe. So 3 hours or 4 hours. What we showed is that if you look at the same point in time after takeoff, so maybe 3 hours after takeoff, you have the same level of nicotine in your system, right? Because you haven't smoked for 3 hours. But the people in the short flights, the flight attendants had much higher craving to smoke than the people in the long flights. And that's because they expected to smoke soon. Right. So again, it's dissociating nicotine levels from craving to smoke. And we think there's a lot more evidence that nicotine
is
a very
second.
minor.
The craving for smoke is trigger the need to smoke?
Yeah, craving is the same as the need. So you have this urge. That's called craving. Right? You feel like you want to smoke. And that's what sort of keeps the habit going. When you feel like you want to do it, you have this urge to smoke. And the urge to smoke, we suggest, is a much more psychological phenomenon than a physiological phenomenon.
You know, I am a testament because I smoked so much. It was disgusting. And then, 20, 25 years ago, I decided to force myself. I just wanted to stop. And so I went to this place with the most boring, unbelievably boring person and you know what? I stopped and I don't care anymore. You can smoke in my face. And I don't care. You know, it's okay. So I guess, but did you persuade anybody?
Yeah, I think certainly we had people who collaborated with us and certainly some people who think that we are right about that. We're still a minority in the sense that you still hear the statement as if it's a fact that nicotine is the driver of smoking. That people are addicted to nicotine. Smokers who smoke regularly are addicted to nicotine. And we think it's just false. So in that sense,
you never smoked, huh? She never smoked.
I never smoked.
She never.
I never smoked either.
Oh, really? So how do you know about craving? Oh, you know about craving for other things, maybe.
I don't have OCD.
Right.
I know about
OCD. So tell me, I don't know if to ask you, the professional and the psychologist, are you optimistic about our future?
I'm an optimistic, generally speaking, for sure. Do I feel optimistic right now? I can't tell you that I feel optimistic. I think what I became aware of is how flimsy our existence here seems to be after this event. So I can't say I'm optimistic right now concretely about our chances of overcoming all these enemies around us and living having a reasonable living situation, livable and durable.
I think we need a little bit more than just miracle.
No, I didn't say miracle. I think
no, but I'm saying because I think that the whole existence of Israel is a miracle, but we need more than miracle. And the thing is that, everybody is trying to focus on their own wish and fear. And some of us think that we got to such a low point that we have to kick back and go up, and some things it will fade and they don't know what will happen, and something that there's no future for us, and we need some time, and to calm down, and it's hard in this condition.
Yeah, but the question is, the big question, if people can change, or because are we going to come back and where we were before, a day before October
I don't think
7th,
so.
when we...
In that sense, I don't think that things will stay as they were. I really don't think so.
There are forces, for example, in the government, if we touch a little bit politics, there are forces in the government, they are keep now, as we speak, doing the change they want, like the...
Yeah, to some extent, I think it's true, but I don't think this government will survive the war. I don't think so. I think they will go away. I think...
I don't see them going away so fast. They need to disappear. And I don't see them disappearing so fast. And it's very annoying.
They will not fade into nothingness, right? But they may not be part of the government. I would hope so, at least. And I think there's so much anger, and there's so much resentment, and there's so... And I think if you're here, especially, you feel the strength of the people, which I found incredible. I mean, spending time with the people in the kibbutz, from the kibbutz, looking at what the army is doing now, and hearing them being interviewed, and so on. I am very impressed with how this...
Yeah, but the strength of the people, it is amazing, and I think we're too good for this government. The government in Israel.
Yeah, I agree with that. And maybe,
but every day that they're there, we'll suffer more, and they need to go home. And many people think it's not the right time, that we should wait till the war is over. And I don't see the end of the war so fast.
No, I don't either. But I think still the critical question is, whenever the war ends, and whenever there'll be an opportunity to get rid of the government, what kind of government will we have? And I personally don't imagine, and I hope I'm right, people like Ben Gvir and Smotrich and so on in the next government. Bibi,
I don't want Netanyahu in the next government. I don't want anybody.
No, I think it is going to be a right-wing government, because the left is completely gone.
Yeah.
And it will not come back for a while, and maybe for good reasons after what happened now. And I always voted for the peace-loving small parties like Meretz, but I think it's gone. I think it's gone.
I know it's not about left and right. It's about good people.
Exactly. So I think we'll see good people, but with nationalistic, fairly militaristic views, like all these generals that we now see. Honest people who might find themselves forced into politics, and will do the right thing, I hope.
Listen, this is a great note. This is a great note.
Reuven, thank you.
To thank him. And I will redefine, if I may, the notion of post-trauma that we all say about ourselves, because we have maybe to be more careful.
Yeah.
Saying, we are all post-trauma. It's still in a way good, but
when you meet people who are really post-traumatic, it's easy to see that you're not one of them.
It's also an excuse.
That's right. Okay, Reuven, what can I tell you? Thank you, and keep, and I will see you soon.
Right. Okay.
And see you everybody next week.
Thank you, Tzili.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.